My talk today is titled Listening, a Most Underrated Skill. What happened to the skill of listening? I have to tell a little story about my daughter, my experience. Um, my daughter is away at college, and we don't talk as often as I'd like to, but I think I've been pretty good about giving her space and freedom as she becomes more independent. She's an adult now. She's forming her own opinions and making her own decisions. But something she said recently really caught me off guard. It really stopped me in my tracks. During a phone call, she stopped all of a sudden and accused me of being the worst listener. I mean, that's how she phrased it. You are the worst listener. I had turned her information sharing, and she was venting on some issues, and I had turned it into an interrogation and analysis and judgment. That surprised me. Nobody had called me a worst listener ever before. I thought I was a pretty good listener. When I used to work, I'm retired now, people thought I was a good listener. Um, of course, I've been retired for a while now. Anyway, I was probably a bit defensive, but as a well-intentioned Buddhist, it made me stop and think about my actions and this concept of listening. It seems like such a simple task, listening, but it's much more difficult than we realize. In fact, it's so basic, I don't think we even think about it. I think we all think that we're good listeners, or we listen every day. It's easy to think we're listening, but most people are probably not doing it very well. Listening seems to be a lost skill or a lost art in today's digitally focused world. We're inundated with so much information daily that we have so little time to process it. The emphasis today seems to be on talking, but not on listening. I mean, just think of the cable news shows and the multiple social media platforms for posting opinions, um, especially the cable news channels lately. It's the world we live in. Instagram, Twitter, or X it's called now, they're all focused on a one-way message or a post, and you're supposed to like it. And you can comment, of course, you can comment. And having said that, there are many inspiring messages that you can see through Instagram. There's a lot of wonderful things the that the internet and the social media has offered us. I'll plug in fact, our OCBC Instagram site just recently opened, and I find many of the temple Instagram pages to be inspiring. Stephen Covey said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Yeah, it's probably true. People seem to want to give their view on things, not necessarily interested in other people's opinions. We're thinking about what to say while somebody's still talking. Most people are not intentionally being rude or selfish. It's just a reflection of our egocentric behavior. It's easy to underestimate the power of purposeful listening. We just don't realize how much we're missing by not appreciating the benefits of listening. Listening is an act of empathy. Listen to be kind. Thich Nhat Hanh described compassionate listening and deep listening in The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching, a very good book. Compassion is needed to listen to others deeply without judging, thus overcoming one's egocentric perspective and shifting the focus from oneself to others. Deep listening is the foundation of right speech. If we cannot listen mindfully, we cannot practice right speech, because no matter what we say, it will not be mindful, because we'll be speaking only of our own ideas and not in response to the other person. He also makes note in his book that many of us have lost our capacity for listening and using loving speech in our own families. We've lost the capacity to speak calmly and compassionately. We get irritated too easily. Um, I think it's very normal for us to communicate differently depending on who we're speaking with. I mean, who we're communicating with, our relationships, but those differ. And I have to admit, I do treat my family differently than if I were speaking to anybody outside the family. Just the familiarity and so forth. I'm trying to do better, and my daughter keeps me honest. We listen to learn. Deep listening requires listening to both what is said and what is not said. The Dalai Lama said, when you talk, you're only repeating what you know, but when you listen, you may learn something new. Deep listening is not easy and requires practice. It's truly a practice of mindfulness, which ultimately requires us to listen deeply to ourselves. By understanding ourselves, we can better understand the reactions we have while listening to others and what prevents us from being compassionate listeners. Our egos really influence so much of our behavior. Paying more attention to how my ego influences my actions and how I think has helped me be more respectful for others, including my family. And I want to share the importance of listening in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is a path of deep reflection through listening. Shinran Shonin introduced the Pure Land path 800 years ago to people from all walks of life who could appreciate the teachings living their everyday lives. This is as opposed to the schools of Buddhism that follow monastic traditions. This practice of listening to the Dharma and living and learning through the ups and downs of our everyday lives is essential to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. We listen to Dharma messages, read books, take classes. With an open heart and mind, we realize we can find aspects of Buddhism everywhere in our lives if we make the effort to listen. Ministers and scholars such as Taitetsu Uno, Gyome Kubose, Nobu Haneda, Kenneth Tanaka, and our own Reverend Bishop Marvin Harada, have all made the teachings so accessible to us by relating the Dharma to aspects of our everyday lives. So many ministers today are doing the same and do their Dharma messages. You could read the BCA blogs. You could listen to or read our everyday Buddhist blog that we set up in OCBC, and you'll see these messages become guidelines, pointers to help us listen and relate to our own personal experiences with the Buddhist teaching. It was very helpful for me and really one of the things that connected me back to Buddhism. I could relate to it. I could understand it. It was made so much more accessible. I just had to listen. I'm going to give you two examples of some very good speakers and writers who have introduced relatable everyday messages in their descriptions. And as I mentioned earlier, Reverend Dr. Nobu Haneda, he's one of my favorites. In his book of essays, The Dharma Breeze, he uses the example of making smoked salmon to describe the Shin Buddhist emphasis on the importance of listening and its relevance to the birth in the Pure Land. So bear with me. These are words from his book. I'll read along with me. To make smoked salmon, we must first put salmon into a smoke box. Then we must keep them in this box for several days. During that time, those salmon will be exposed to the smoke. After several days, we take them out of the box and find that they have become smoked salmon. The Buddhist implications of this example are as follows. Salmon symbolizes us human beings. A smoke box symbolizes birth in the Pure Land, the Sangha in his terms. And becoming perfectly smoked salmon symbolizes becoming Buddhas. If salmon are put into a smoke box and kept there for a certain length of time, they will never fail to become full-fledged smoked salmon. It is not the talents or abilities of the salmon that transforms them into smoked salmon. It's the power of the smoke that transforms them into full-fledged smoked salmon. Here, there are two things that are important: smoke and exposure to smoke. In human life, The smoke means words, and exposure to the smoke means listening to words. Just as exposure to the smoke alone creates smoked salmon, listening to the words alone realizes Buddhahood. And so much of that is essentially Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Um, again, Dr. Haneda makes these very complex Buddhist terms very relatable in this explanation. But I do have to clarify that he refers to the Pure Land as the Sangha, where one studies the Dharma. Birth in the Pure Land is becoming part of the Sangha. So becoming part of the Sangha and being exposed to the words and joining in with the Sangha and listening to the words, those help you reach what we refer to as enlightenment. You become, just by listening to the words alone, you realize Buddhahood. You attain Shinjin. This is why he feels, in his belief, he believes the Sangha is the most important of the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It's what enables us to be exposed to the words, and in this community, to expose ourselves to the smoke and listen to the words and become Buddhas. Another good article I read is from Reverend Kyonobu Kuwahara from the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. He wrote a Dharma message on December 6, 2021 for the BCA website titled Jodo Shinshu, Path of Deep Listening. He shared 3 tips on how to listen deeply. He explained that they are recited at some Jodo Shinshu temples in Japan at the start of the service to help people understand how to listen. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, his 3 points. Listen as if I'm listening to this message for the first time. Everything changes. Dharma messages, everything changes. Dharma messages, even those that ministers repeat, bring us something new or inspiring when we listen attentively, as if we listen to them for the first time. I have reread essays, and yes, I've heard Dharma talks several times from several ministers, and I found new meaning always in a new context. Again, things change. We change how we listen. The message, you get something different from message every time. So keep our ears open and listen as if you're listening for the first time. Listen as if the message is from myself alone. Messages that discuss greed, anger, and stupidity are not meant to find fault in others. The Dharma is intended to guide each of us so that we can know ourselves in the light of the Dharma, not anyone else. It's because of our ego that it's easy to think messages target someone else, especially, negative context. If you can't internalize the teaching, then you can't grow. Listen as if it's the last occasion to listen to the Dharma in my life. If we take the truth of impermanence seriously, we accept that there is no guarantee that we will be able to listen to the Dharma next week. Be earnest. Don't postpone an opportunity to listen. Reverend Kuwahara says that the message is also appropriate for ministers in delivering Dharma messages. You may not be able to give that message next week. So again, take every opportunity to learn. It's a path that we all take. We grow and learn. Reverend Kuwahara concludes that Jodo Shinshu is the path of deep listening. He tells us that it is not just to receive the voice of the speaker passively with our ears. How seriously or attentively we engage ourselves in the Dharma messages matter. When we do so, we not only obtain the information in our brains, but something profound touches or fulfills our hearts. And when we recite the Nembutsu, we can do so with true gratitude and compassion in our hearts. Appreciating and practicing the skill of listening is an integral part of our journey on our Buddhist path. The opportunity for practice is everywhere, every day of our lives. And then finally, I'd like to conclude with a poem from Reverend Kimberly T. Tsuji, um, from his book, The Heart of the Buddha Dharma, and I'll read it. We can read it together. Listen to the voice of the Dharma. Listen to the birds singing in the morning, the wind sighing in the boughs overhead, and the roar of the waves on the beach. Listen to the rain on the roof and the snow falling in the fields. The Dharma speaks to us through the sounds of the world, forcefully and eloquently and beautifully. It speaks of the unending change around us, the immutable truth of interdependence, and the peace in nature. Do we have the ears to hear and listen? Listen to the Nembutsu and the Hondo. Listen to the noble silence of the Buddha. Namo Mitabusu, Namo Mitabusu, Namo Mitabusu, Namo Mitabusu.